I'm Sean Barstow. Oh, actually, got one more? No? Okay. So I'm Sean Barstow. I go by B-Dub. I'm also the Price Campus, also aviation. I do work with Baron quite a bit. I'd like to present him as our official presenter today. Just so you guys know, the session has been recorded, it will be captioned and uploaded to the ETE YouTube channel. I'd like to welcome everybody out. I'm glad this is the last session. You stuck in there, great. This should be a fun one. He always has some really neat slides. So this is Professor Baron Wesemann. He is professional practice professor, associate department head, College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences, and then Department of Aviation Technology. His session today is the Fly High, How to Create Senior Capstone Experiences Using Self-Directed Service Learning Through Instructor Mentorship. See, that is just a long title. Okay, and the time is now yours. You have an official 34 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. As well as you mock me for this long title, I know since I'm a PhD candidate, I need a long title, right? The dissertation. So yes, this is related to my dissertation. But in the last 10 years at Utah State University, I have found it exciting to take the skills I learned from a 27th career in the Air Force back into the Utah State University, into the student environment. In fact, this topic started 33 years ago when I was a senior at the Air Force Academy doing a service learning project. We're in a class of 40 students, and somehow they all pointed to me and said, Cadet Wesemann, you're going to be our project leader. We're going to build a bridge, and I'll talk about that today. But that service learning helped me understand how these service learning projects can be a great learning opportunity for students. And we're going to use a term, so I'm going to call it service learning. I'm going to call it community engaged learning. Is any other terms? And these types of experiences are probably familiar to all of us in one capacity or another, right? So being a good pilot, here's today's flight plan for the mission. And I need to stay close up here because the microphone up here is not working, so I can't use the lavalier. So I won't move around as much as I normally do. So let's talk about today. We're going to talk about these things, and then we'll have a little debrief at the end, and we've got 30 minutes to do it all. So why service learning? You're involved with the Master's Project. Why service learning?
Well, for me, it's part of Utah State's mission of kind of like giving back to the community. And I'm a dietitian by training, so all of my students are trained to be dietitians, which is a health profession. We're giving back to our community, and so that's why I'm interested in it.
Absolutely. I was so excited when I became a part of our aviation technology program is in the College of Agriculture and Applied Sciences. Our dean at the time, Ken White, who's now the senior vice president, he was also the vice president of extension. And so that first ETE conference I went to, there was a presentation on what it means to be a land-grant university. And so I went there because I'd heard about it and had no idea what it was. And I spent a whole session just on the history of the land-grant university. And I thought, how fortunate, since this ties into my desire to have community-engaged learning. I work with Civil Air Patrol and Scouts and other youth organizations, and I'll talk about how we can mentor those clubs for that community engagement. So you're exactly right. What else? Why service learning? Why service learning? You said that you work with your club, Arnold Air Society. How is service learning important to you?
Yeah, I think as we develop leaders of the Air Force, having a mentality of servant leadership is a really key aspect of having that mentality of serving others in your leadership and giving them that experience while you're here at Utah State to come up with ways that they can serve the community and kind of instills that mentality of servant leadership.
Growing up, a German saying is you can't see beyond your own nose. In other words, you don't see the world around you. You're very self-centered. But this idea of service learning is you look outward, right? You look to the communities. Look. One more. Anybody else? Yes.
I have an example. So we have a student, we offered him extra credit, we have a whole class extra credit, to come down and help us what we call a drone cage, where they actually fly little mini drones inside this cage. It was in a junior high in Salt Lake. So when our students came down, he helped out with the cage. A company called Open Skies, who does all the drone shows, they saw him there, they saw he was volunteering, and they hired him on the spot. So service learning deals with that hands-on. You're doing it in public service for people. Businesses understand that. They recognize that, and it's part of being a professional.
Having worked with aviation and working with industry, one of our recruiters, Tom Davis, who's a USU alumni, he was friends with Big Blue when he was here at Utah State. He has a question on his application for SkyWest. He didn't create it, it's on the application. It says, what have you done in community service? And he tells the students every time he comes, don't leave that question blank. And so the reason I tell my first year students is you've got 4 years to differentiate yourself. And industry looks for these opportunities where you have served others and learned. So let's talk about life service learning. First of all, it's experiential learning. That means you experience it. It's action. It's not sitting behind a computer. It's not theoretical. You put all those things in action. That's why I think as a capstone project or as a senior, now you've learned those basic lessons of leadership or nursing or aviation, and now you apply them in that way. So it's hands-on experiential learning. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the pedagogy today, but there's an incredible science in my references where it talks about that. But the other thing we talked about is doing good. We want those character traits. We want people to develop that personality that they look beyond themselves, that servant leadership. I'm glad you brought that up. There's been a trend since the 80s to really focus on not just having a company, but that your company does good. How many of you seen a commercial where the whole commercial is about how they, every time you buy a pair of socks, they donate a pair of socks? Or the community service projects that they do, right? Because they have realized that we as human beings look for that connection, right? So we talk about these qualities of internal, but there's also academic outcomes. And we got a slide here that talks about specific outcomes that we can have that they learn. And those outcomes are measurable and we'll be able to help them out, right? But we want to be able to have the students be connected to society, connected to industry, connected to youth, connected to those different environments. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail as well. But here's a big thing. I saw this much more during COVID. I saw my seniors a couple 2 years ago, and I looked around the room and I go, how come I don't recognize anybody? They go, Professor Barron. That's the call sign on the Air Force. You got a good call sign, you keep it. They go, Professor Barron. It was during COVID when you had us as freshmen, and all of us were on Zoom, and you never saw us when you turned our cameras on. But they lost some connection. And so last year's class was the first class that graduated who had no high school graduation, who didn't have that experience, right? And so they lost some of that connectedness that really helps us be human. But we're going to talk about those social emotional skills, talk about the civic participation, because as we saw today at one of the Spark shops, community-engaged learning is how we take our learning and do good in the community. And there's some wonderful lessons to learn. So, but the key to this right here is it just doesn't benefit the individual, it benefits the organization you're serving, the communities and society as a whole. So that's why I really believe in this. So where can we do this? What are some environments? Where do we use service learning? Shout it out. Where do you see it?
Oh, anywhere, but relating to me, we can fix cars for people that maybe don't have enough resources for themselves.
Yeah. So in other words, hey, you bring a car in and we're going to fix it for free so our students learn how to work on that kind of car, right? I got free haircuts because I went to community college, and most of the time they were pretty good and the teacher didn't have to fix it too much, right? I got a nice short haircut. But we can do that, right? There's certain things in the nursing community that they can go and they volunteer as they experience before they graduate under the supervision of a qualified nurse, right? And so there's things that we can do. So look for those areas we can do, right? And so I think about industry, working in industry or communities. A lot of our students will want to be in academics, and I'll talk about that some examples. They like to be a TA for a class. They're getting ready to become a certified flight instructor where they have to teach basic flying. So they'll be a TA, teacher's assistant, for that private pilot course. Now they have to relearn that material. And some of the students tell me in the reflection at the end of the class, they say, I remember the TA when I was a private pilot because the teacher was a little too intimidating. But I could go to the TA because he was a student like me. Or she was someone that understood and I could relate to her. And she helped me get through this course. And so I wanted to be that. And the hardest thing for them is they realized when the students asked them questions that they were now the expert. And they go, Baron, I'm just a senior at Utah State. And yet they were looking up to me as the expert. But that preparation to be an instructor pilot where now you are the master and they're the apprentice has to happen very quickly. In aviation, it's always like that, where there's one instructor working one-on-one with the student in an aircraft, right? But the way I create these, they're self-directed, self-selective, and self-energized projects. I meet with them at the beginning of the semester, and we create a path for them. They have a midterm report, and then a final project deliverable. Could be a video, could be a PowerPoint, could be a paper, could be a manual, whatever they come up with that they're working. But often I said, take pictures of the experience and share with me your learning opportunities. But when we create this, it's always a service learning. And by having it be a capstone at the end of their senior year, or at the end of the program, these are seniors, some juniors, they have all that experience, they made some connections, they talk to people, and most of them have an ability to do it. Now, a few of them want to do like a tail dragger, tail plane grading, or flow plane grading, and I say, great, but now come back and tell us about your experience. Where did you go? What did you do? How did you learn? Because now you're paying it forward to the next generation so they can see what you did. So even if it's more of a further learning experience, I still have them come back and do a presentation. But one thing you mentioned was Honor Layer Society. Tell me about this organization. What is its purpose in college?
Yeah, so it's think of it as like an honors society type of organization. It's a national organization that we have a charter unit here, or Air Force ROTC, but it's essentially meant for Air Force ROTC cadets to get more professional development, get experience with general officers from around the country, other cadets around the country, but to also give them opportunities to create service projects and to participate in their community where they're at, to again just develop themselves as a selfless leader. As they're going to be leading people in the Air Force, they want to develop that mentality of thinking about others, about the people that they're leading, the people in their community. So it's an organization where they kind of balance the professional aspect of it, but also the interacting with your community. Like you see with Hill Air Force Base, there's a lot of community outreach. We want to get them in that mentality of like, wherever you go, reach out to the community.
And look for those opportunities. How many of you have a club in your department or where you work? They have a student club. Yep. Not yet?
No, we're a graduate program.
Graduate program. Is it online?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little more challenging. I understand that. Yes?
Yes.
And what kind of club is it?
It's the Student Nurses Association.
Is it a national organization?
They could join the national
Okay.
if they chose to.
So I was going to talk about it. So some organizations like our Society of Aviation Maintenance Professionals is a local club started by Randy Chesley back in the 90s. And it's only a local club, but they participate in some regional, national maintenance competitions. So sometimes you're part of, whereas Honor Layer Society is a national organization, you become a local chapter of it, right? Why would you think students want, this was last year's presentation, but why do students want to join these clubs? What are some reasons why students don't want to join clubs? Or why you as an instructor may want to be an advisor for one?
Extra learning.
Extra learning? Experience?
And say it builds their professional network.
Networking, the connections of being engaged. Absolutely. You mentioned that sometimes you get access to high-ranking military officers we call generals and admirals, right? Or to experienced seasoned professionals in industry, right? And so since I've been here last year, I talked about how we have 8 different aviation clubs that go from helicopters and drones and pilots and maintenance, and they connect to industry and gives them opportunities for one of the most important lessons, which is leadership, right? Because instead of having me do everything, if the students do it, they learn from those experiences. And we do a lot of those clubs and those outreach events. So think about that. But the idea, it's in the real world, right? It's not in the academic world on a computer. It's not just reading books. So you can have them do an experience, and I'm sure you do. Even though it's an online course, they have to go out and do a project to create something where they can be able to adapt it. So the hardest challenge I have is about 80% of the students know what they want to do and they're excited, and about 20% go, well, what do you have for me, Brian? Professor? What do you have for me to do? And I go, well, I can tell you. So I always have a list of about 4 or 5 different projects, organizations, activities coming up where they can be involved. And the idea is give them opportunities to take as much on as they can. A couple things here. How? Let's go back to the story. So we get the class together, and this other class was our sister class, and they had an advisor. Their job was to build a device to assist somebody helping get out of the bathtub from his wheelchair. He was no one was there to help take care of him. He wanted some independence. So they designed a system on the ceiling where the individual could pull himself out of the wheelchair, hop in the bathtub to be able to take baths and be independent. Another group built a pinball machine for some of those wheelchair bound. and they gave it to an organization where he goes. It's like a, for lack of a better word, daycare for folks in wheelchairs. So it was at this community home, and they'd be able to go up, and so they lowered it and designed a pinball machine, again, back in the 80s, to be able to play. Our class has said, well, the town of Green Mountain Falls has this wonderful lake, and had this gazebo in the middle, and they decided to put a causeway to it that killed the water and the fish. It didn't circulate, and you're going to design and build a bridge. And everybody in the class said, we're going to do what? Any civil engineering majors? Nope. What's somebody's major? All these things, and I was international affairs, political science. They go, well, you're the politician, you're going to be in charge of this class. So the 40 of us got together with an advisor who was an engineer, and we designed this bridge. We contracted the concrete pillars, but we put the wood together, the pipes for the gas lights, the benches. We designed the benches so you could sit this way and fish over the ledge, or sit this way. It was wide enough with beams so you could drive a car down the middle, because that's where the weight was, but the actual weight had to be the majority of people, the maximum people you have on there. It took us about 2.5 months to design it. The city had some concrete and the wood donated, the gas company donated the lights, and then we were able to complete this bridge. We actually built this bridge. Now, unbeknownst to the instructor, the day we finished it, I took my truck out and I put some beams here, and we drove up on it to test it. He shows up and goes, what are you doing? We were testing the bridge. He goes, I need to inspect it before you get tested. But it passed. So we're pretty happy. But at the end of the semester, this was the hardest thing. He goes, oh, by the way, now you have to assign grades and has to average out to an 88%. And I looked at him and I go, what do you mean 88%? Can we all get A's? He goes, no, it has to average out to 88%. And I looked at him and said, but there's nobody who was a sucker. Everybody built. Everybody came together. We did this project. And that was the old Kirby Air Force Academy. So I had to go to the dean of the department and write a letter of protest. So in the end, I could have an average 90.5%. So I gave up 2 B's and the rest A's. But it was the hardest thing, and I learned my lesson in academia. But how do we do this? So this is the academic portion, okay? The discipline-based model may be for a nursing club, right? Or a nursing project. It's very specific to the discipline of nursing. And not anybody else really would be qualified or able to do it. But what would be an example you think of a project that would be discipline-based? Have you done one with the students? Or what type of project?
So their capstone's more specific, where they get partnered with a nurse and they go out and actually have to do 120 hours on the floor with the nurse.
So they go out there. So that's very much a discipline-based project where it is in the discipline of nursing, and they have to have certain qualifications of understanding, like but they go out there, they get to do IVs, and they get to do blood pressure, and they get to do everything, right?
Yeah.
Very base. That's a good example. The problem-based model, that was what I did, right? You see that problem-based? Wasn't based upon our area of expertise. It was based upon someone gave us a problem, and we had to go out there and solve that problem. Who do you think of a problem-based model? Maybe a vehicle comes in, right?
Yep, could be something that they don't know what's wrong with it. They gotta figure out what's wrong with it. And
they said, hey, this truck, my grandfather gave me this truck, so it's sitting in the barn for 2 years. It would be great on our farm if we were working again. We had no idea what's wrong with it, and we towed it in here, Okay. And now they got to figure it out. Where do you start? With the triage, right?
right.
And the whole goal is to get it working again, right?
Right.
Capstone-based model is where it's designed as a capstone project for a course. And so that may be similar to what you do a little bit, because it's a capstone after they have the learning. But probably in your program, a capstone is, it's their final semester. What are they going to do something meaningful like that, right? A capstone is a culmination of all their learning to present. I do know a capstone model, for example, is one of my friends teaches music, and now she's retired and she's just a mentor for projects. She accompanies people on piano and organ for the musicians. And their capstone project is they have to do a recital. So they have to come up with a piece from a famous person, they have to create their own music, and they have to play. It's a 45-minute recital on the violin, for example. And so that is really much a capstone-based model where they have to go say, this is what I've learned as a, professional musician. So that's kind of a neat one there. Service internship. What do you think that is? That's yours kind of
I
awesome.
kind of fall into a couple of
Yeah,
them.
exactly. A service internship where they go actually and they do a service project. It's almost like working for a company, right? We had one senior who went to go work with a flight company up in the Northwest in Washington. He goes, oh, I'm gonna go out there and fly an airplane. No, Monday through Thursday, he was a scheduler. And the next Monday through Thursday, he went and supervised aircraft cleaning on corporate aircraft. So on the airlines, this big group of people come in on a corporate aircraft. Who's responsible for cleaning the lab? The pilots. Who's responsible to shine all the buckles and put all the snacks together? The pilots. So this person went out there, and for 4 days, all they did was clean the airplane and get everything ready for the different clients. Oh, this client wants this snack. Next week, the client wants this snack. But on Fridays, they got to go fly. If it was an empty jet to go pick someone up, guess what? They got to go up there in the seat and fly. So they realized that was definitely a service internship, which means I'm out there doing what they do, right? Okay, action research model. This is the theory that, again, you're putting into action what you learned. Like when we did our bridge, we put it into action. It wasn't just, hey, we're going to plan this out. We went after, we cut the wood, we drilled it, we put it together, we sealed it. We did all that work out there as a group of folks out there in the bitter cold of winter. Okay? So another one here, this one doesn't fit with the other models, but it's called the directed study or extra credit. So a lot of times, a professor, the best way to explain this is anyone doing research, and you need help with a research project. So what do? They go out there and they collect the data for you, or they help monitor some research. That's an example of what I could think of a directed study, where it's kind of part of a professor's role. And so that could be a capstone project, especially for some of the more research-based trades. Still service learning because they're doing research in their field, but for me, not as exciting as going out there in the community and doing some projects. So those are some of the models of what you can do. So, but the key is the impact. What is the impact going to be? And so that is where the reward comes in, and where the most important thing of reflection. So when I look at impact, the personal development on the individual. What do they learn about themselves? So whenever I do this capstone, I have them write a short reflection paper. Here's the project, here's the deliverable. The reflection paper is, what did I learn about myself? What did I learn? And here, some of the feedback I get, I wish I could show you some videos. I got 57-minute videos that students said, I learned about time management. I learned about procrastination. I learned about record keeping. I learned how I could be better in looking at others and not just myself. And almost without fail, at the end of the reflection, they say, this was one of my favorite classes I took here at Utah State because of what I got to do. And I'll show you a couple examples. Second is the social outcomes, right? We talk about the community engagement, we talk about being involved and how important that is. The career development, the networking, which you mentioned. How many times do people make connections? My son did this when he was at Power School of Mines. He got an internship with Microsoft. And they gave him some of the most menial tasks, and he goes, it wasn't really as exciting as I thought. I got to work on some cool things, but it was just kind of busy work. But at the end of the summer, they offered him a job. And so they got to see how he worked. So for him, it was. But this is one that I talked about last year. Why do we have advisors for clubs? How many of you have student classes that are in the small size, like 10 to 12? Okay? You get to know them pretty well. Anybody have classes over 50 students? Okay? Yeah, how well do you get to know 50 students on a semester? Exactly. When I have a class over 250, my neighbor teaches calculus. 250 students in a lecture hall. There's no way he gets to know that. But when I look at my students, these small classes, these one-on-one connections, you really get to know them. You really get to mentor them as well, right? And studies have shown improved graduation rates. Students who participate in these types of experiences have improved graduation rates because they're able to see the purpose of what they're doing. So just a couple quick slides on some of the impacts and how to do it. So objectives, this is one of the hardest things, is sitting down to make it academic. They know what they want to do, they know how they're going to get there. We said, okay, now I'm going to make it academic. You need 3 to 5 objectives. Some give you 6, right? So responsibilities, they'll take attendance, grading, record keeping, participate in lectures. So I told them you have to teach too. So one of the weeks as an instructor had a family reunion to go to, and guess what? That student got to teach a lecture. He goes, Darren, I spent 2 hours preparing, and I got to the class, and I was done in 15 minutes, and I looked at the clock and went, how in the world do I get through the rest of this? He goes, any questions? And guess what? For 20 minutes he answered questions, and he goes, but I knew the answers, only one I had to look at. And he was so excited. He goes, I have so much respect for my professor. I have no idea it took so much effort, but what a learning experience, and what they do. My goal is to be comfortable talking to new people. I thought that was really impressive, right? Learning new technology. And that was the thing is he goes, I didn't realize all the technology is behind the scene. And that was a lot of fun. And creating a successful event, being able to help people with the project. So let's focus on that mentoring aspect. How often should you connect with the students during this semester-long project? How often do you connect with them?
So I like to keep it simple and stupid.
Yeah?
I really wish ours is definitely not simple, but it's a master's, so it's a little bit more technical. But I'm meeting with them pretty regularly to help them stay on track. But
that's one of the keys. You teach online class? Yeah. Is it synchronous or asynchronous?
So it's a mix. It's a hybrid of some informal and some broadcast.
The key is you got to stay engaged with the students. You got to stay connected, right? Find a way to, the bigger classes is hard, but in these kind of capstone courses, what's your enrollment in the capstone courses?
It's our senior year students, so depends on the class size.
Yeah, our program's growing. I usually have 28 to 30. I have 55 this fall, 57.
My cap for my course is 32.
Yeah, but I'm going, how do I not help them, right? So I've carved out some into the drone program, but I still have 57, right? But this is a gal here. Her senior project was to create what we call Girls in Aviation Day. What an exciting opportunity. And she brought in 100 girls. This is an alumni, Kinza Loosley. She's one of the SkyWest video talents. This here individual, he helped us with our career conference. And so I put the student on stage with us, right? I put it out there. So let students do what they can. If they're not very experienced, I need a little more excitement, a little more help. If they're very experienced, I stand back and let them do more. That's what you can tailor this engagement. Yes?
I think something I've learned is it's not always about a successful outcome of their project. It's about what the student learned.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
sometimes really hard as faculty.
Oh, it is. So here's how I look at it. It's an instructor pilot. If it's something that's not going to affect the flight, they're 100 feet high in altitude, I just say, hey, look at your altitude. Now, if they're 10 knots slow, then I say, my airplane, I add power and put them on. So sometimes you can allow them to just have, okay, it's a learning experience. But every once in a while, you have to step in.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing as a parent, as a scoutmaster, as a teacher, is when do I step in? When can I let it slide? Good point right there, right? So, in other words, look at, is this online? Is this in person? That affects how much. If you're going to be there with them versus they're with the company, but if it's online, how do I gauge? Do I wait for them to ask? It's been 2 weeks. Do I, that's part of the contract. Most of my students say, I'll email Professor Barron every 2 weeks. And that works out fine for me. Minimum 2 weeks. I don't want to go a month, But some of them push that limit quite often. So it's more than just one class, though. More than just one contact. Make sure you stay engaged with those students. That mentoring is important. But here with the Skyways Pathway program, it's a much more formal program. And so when I was working with that student, it was much more mentoring, weekly basis. Some of my students find a mentor doesn't have to be me, and they meet with them almost daily. The folks working at 737 said, come see some ad. We got a brand new 737 said, hopefully it'll be up and running. They met with the professor almost every day for 2 months, trying to get everything working on it. So again, tailor it's what you need. But the key is, these are the students that are easy to write letters of recommendation for. Because I know them, right? These are the ones you get engaged with, and the ones that are exciting. I've had many students find success. But what's cool is, even SkyWest realized, when you join this program, now that we're part of the program, you get access to a pilot mentor. So this is the assessment part, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, because they lessened on assessment. But at the end of the semester, this is one of the most important things. The students reflect, they tell me how they did. They provide, especially at graduate level, they can provide that assessment, right? And so these are all videos. And I wish I had time to show the videos, but push them. If they're more powerful, push them, let them stretch. Set the SMART goals and then hold them accountable. But this reflection was powerful. And so this student here talked about, what happened for him. And this was also a helicopter student. It was just so much fun to see their reflections. And now I want to just take the last couple of minutes about why is this important for you all. How many of you are in line to document for promotion? Okay? Is that an important part of your jobs, right? It is. And so, when you look at what it must be teaching, you have to have student peer evaluations, curriculum development, but guess what? We also have evidence of teaching inside and outside the classroom. This is teaching outside the classroom, right? You're creating materials for it, undergraduate teaching fellows, but guess what? Impact practices is community engaged teaching. So this is one way to really be involved. So document what you're doing. Okay, success students and postgraduate endeavors. Even when you look at service, which is applicable to everybody here, guess what? Membership of the committees, we got that, national organizations, but guess what is also engagement in local communities. So when you mentor the students, you're getting credit under both teaching and service. Yes, you can document it under both sides. Use pictures, use anecdotes, and show the impact that those students have in communities. Learn ways to document it, okay? Now, if you say, well, I don't have something, and you don't have an extension, which is our land grant mission, well, guess what? Even if you don't have an assigned effort land grant mission extension, you can still count that as service. So here's an example of a student that was doing an extension mission that I helped mentor. So Heather Rollins over here was doing her senior project as part of an extension. So she went out there to the communities. This is us with the grant of the Navajo Mission. This is going out to 4-H camps where they're building chuck gliders, and this is when we're out there flying in the outside. So she is out there in the communities. This was community-based learning, one of the most powerful examples. ETE, how many of you worked on ETE badges, okay? I encourage you to. This is your evidence of being a professional educator, helping you improve your teaching skills. You improve your skills in nursing and business and automotive and all those other areas, but guess what? Being able to find teaching skills. So challenge yourself to come here and present. So these are just some sample areas where you can go in. So foundation use your teaching, guess what? You can implement things you learned here today. First implement, go to a seminar. Other teaching workshops, that's what this is. So now go online and you can say, I went to Professor Barron's presentations and I implemented these in my classroom, submit it, and you've completed a badge. So look for ways to document what you're going to be doing anyway. So how do we do today? Okay, why service learning? Real quick. Why is this important for students?
Development.
Yeah.
Personal development.
Develop them as a human being, right? Don't let that. Yes.
Social development.
Social development. Absolutely. Professional development. Yes. So it develops that individual, right? The pedagogy support, we can spend lots of time, but it's outside the classroom. That's what I think is so key. We get outside the classroom, we go in the communities where the folks are. Okay? And I didn't spend a lot of time on objectives because I think you all understand how to set them up. But the key is work with the students. Don't give them 20. Get more than one, but find meaningful way to do it. Mentor the students through the process, but at the end, when you do the assessment, let them create it. And then document for promotion. And remember, to my students, I'm the instructor. To myself, I'm always a student. And I tell students, you're going to have trials, you're going to have challenges, things are going to happen, the weather's going to be bad, the airplane's broken, you can't get your tail driver license, you get sick, you couldn't make that event. You have to learn to adapt and overcome. But guess what? You're going to be doing those dishes anyway. You might as well have a good attitude, right? Attitude affects everything. So here are my 3 references, pages. But here's the key. So when we completed this project my senior year, guess who invited to come out and present? And they actually gave me, I represented the class, a proclamation stating, thank you to United States Air Force Academy class. They put it on a plaque. And if you go to Green Mountain Falls and see this bridge on the left side, there is a little memorial or whatever to this event, and there's a plaque, not my name on it, but Air Force Academy Engineering 440 class, and there is our class. So I think it had a lasting impact. It affected my life, and little did I know 33 years ago that I would go from the student to now the instructor on how to mentor senior projects. So fly high and find ways to mentor your students. Any questions for me as we complete our session?